Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby.
Hello and welcome to Movies vs. Capitalism, an anti-capitalist movie podcast. This is Frank.
And this is Rivka.
Rivka, we're both absolutely exhausted.
Yeah.
At the time of this recording. I just started a new job and it's been great, but it's been go, 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 go. What are you tired from?
Just, coming back from one of my 10 jobs because
Sure.
That's what it takes. And I'm not complaining. I feel really lucky and privileged to have work right now. It's just, I am complaining about the exhaustion. I wish we had a different system.
Same. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm in agreement with you on that. Do you get more tired from the length of hours you work or the having to juggle different commitments, responsibilities? Because I find that sometimes even if I'm not working a lot of hours, if I'm juggling, spinning discs between multiple places, tasks, commitments, that is actually more exhausting to me sometimes.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know. I think I'm so used to having many balls, discs in the air.
It's not even discs. I realize dishes, plates.
Dishes,
not even dishes, plates. God, yep, spinning discs. That's where we're at.
But yeah, that's an interesting question. And I'm also I think it's just more physical. I was teaching today, so that was just physically exhausting, playing pretend and,
Sure.
all that. But yeah, no, you're right. It's probably a mix of all the things. But at least it's not too bad of an exhaustion. I do think my brain, I've noticed this week, my brain grasping for simple things like names or which is always a sign that I'm I need to have a break from tech and just read a little more or just look at the sky for a moment,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I find whenever I'm reading, my brain capacities I find that my brain works better, for sure.
Yes. Yeah.
Speaking of taking a break, we are actually going to be taking a break from this podcast for the next couple of weeks. Like I said, we've just been working a lot. I started a new job, so we needed just a chance to take a little breather. Although we will be putting out a new episode next week for our paid subscribers, and that will be on the brand new theatrical release film Civil War, written and directed by Alex Garland, that everybody is talking about. Actually, I don't think anyone's talking about it. I haven't heard fucking shit about this movie.
Spoiler, we have very strong opinions. We saw it together even.
We did.
Have resisted from talking too much about it, but it was hilarious because the movie place that we saw it was one of those where you could...
The movie place?
Order food, so there was the movie place. See what I'm... It's only going to get worse. This is why we're taking a break, because you don't want to hear us all the cognitive functioning. Yes, the movie place that we were at, we could write down notes and it was funny to look over at you, Frank, and you're under the light,
scribbling just in darkness.
Such nerds.
Oh, man. Yeah, so that'll be coming out next week, and then there will be a full break the following week, and then we'll be back with some more free episodes. But we had one thing that we wanted to talk about today before we get to our interview, and I think this kind of fits in what we're talking about. At the very least, the man has hosted a lot of different TV shows, so I feel like he qualifies to be discussed on Movies versus Capitalism. So if you haven't heard about this story, David Chang, celebrity chef, creator of Momofuku, very, very successful, has a bunch of shows on Netflix and has his own, retail line of cooking products. A few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, so he has an item that he retails, which is branded the Momofuku Chili Crunch, and it is a chili crisp condiment, traditional Chinese condiment that David Chang popularized and has been, selling under the Momofuku brand for the last several years. At the same time, there's also been a number of other mom and pop AAPI-owned companies that have also created their version of a chili crisp or a chili crunch. So about maybe a month ago or so, David Chang decided to send all of those smaller companies cease and desist letters. Wow. He insisted that chili crunch was trademarked and it belonged to him, and they better cut it out or else he's going to bring down the weight of all of his legal apparatus on them. And rightfully so, received a lot of backlash. I mean, directly from some of the people that he told to stop. Some people did stop. Some people were like, fuck, we don't want to go up against David Chang. I guess we got to stop making this stuff. Some grocery stores stopped carrying the alternative chili crunches because they were like, hey, we're not trying to get into this legal battle with David Chang. And a lot of people came for him, including some of these company owners saying like, yo, dude, you're being a fucking trademark bully. If anything, and you're only going after other folks in the AAPI community. So like, what, you have to be the big bad capitalist who's the only person that produces chili crunch? The only people you are hurting with this are other members of your community. And the internet as well was rightfully like, yo, fuck David Chang. This is some capitalist bullshit. So I know you hadn't even heard about this, but
yeah, I hadn't heard about it. But it occurs to me as you're saying this, I think this is what's coming as a result of getting more and more into Marxist thinking and just being like, yeah, fuck David Chang. But it's so much easier to be like, fuck him, and not like the compulsory need to build capital. Like, of course, that's what's happening.
Sure.
Because that's what this system necessitates, is to compete and make sure that there is one big bad capitalist on the block, because that's how it works. So I don't know. I mean, this is where like union building and solidarity building, and I guess it worked in this sense. The smaller businesses came together, but again, it's a great example of like that's like a Band-Aid, right? Mm-hmm. Because there's going to be someone else will pop up who's like, and it's also interesting thinking about the role of trademark and intellectual property and all of these kind of legal terms that need legal experts to help you solidify, and you need capital for that, and just
But this was literally on like a condiment, this would be like someone saying like, I own ketchup. Yeah. Like no one else, like I'm the creator of ketchup, I'm the creator of mayonnaise.
Well, I'm sure Heinz has tried to do that, right? Like, well, sure, I mean, they're gonna try and do, that's why it's kind of brilliant. It's like, it's good to talk about, because it's like, yeah.
Mm-hmm. To me, this story was emblematic of the neoliberal conception of representation and equality, meaning like to a neoliberal thinker, they see someone from a historically marginalized community reach great success and they're like, that's great, we did it. The end. Like, racism over. Whereas a Marxist thinker, I mean, a materialist thinker is adding the class analysis to that and saying, okay, well, that's cool that one person at the top is making a ton of money. That does not help all of the people at the bottom who are still struggling. And it's like, we talked about it with Barbie. Just because Greta Gerwig made a bajillion dollars with Barbie doesn't mean that like all of the female directors have succeeded. And I feel similarly about this. And then and then you put the added layer on that he's actually going after the people in his community that are in a lower economic class than him. So it really compounds this fucked up dynamic.
Totally.
And I should add, to his credit, David Chang has agreed to drop all of the cease and desists. He's no longer going to be going after the trademark. He's letting all this go after the backlash. Who knows if he was just like, hey, this is bad for my brand, or who knows if he had like an actual revelatory moment. Regardless, he has dropped it. And he said, quote, first and foremost, I want to apologize to everyone in the AAPI community who's been hurt or feels like I've marginalized them or put a ceiling on them by our actions. So
yeah, well, I think that's important, because I think we don't talk enough about the possibility, and this actually came up in our reading group recently about like the possibilities of re-education, and that there are historical examples of that. The thing about a system casting roles means that you actually can be re-educated and change and make different policies when you become aware of them and step back and transform how you do business. And I think too often we lose sight of like that. That's actually the ideal possibility, right? Is for people to be re-educated and make their changes, how they maneuver,
Yeah, it's like what we want. It's like the outcome that we want.
Yeah, we talk a lot about, or I don't know if we talk a lot about this, but there's a lot of talk about the guillotine and, and like certainly...
Some other people might be talking about the guillotine.
We've talked about the guillotine, I'm sure. But that's not I guess like the point is like that's a very cinematic option and sometimes necessary revolutionary option, but not the only one.
100%.
We still love the t-shirt with the guillotine that our friend of the pod sent us, though.
Oh, yes. Foot2Face. Foot2Face.com. You can get wonderful guillotine t-shirts at foot2face.com. All right, well, let's move on. Let's get to our interview today. This was a really, really fun one with a movie that I had not seen before, and it was such a joy, Princess Mononoke. But before we do, as always, we want to remind our audience that we do not sell ads on this show. We donate our ad space. If you want to advertise with us, you can shoot us an email. But we rely completely on community support to keep the show going. So if you'd like to support us, you can do that by subscribing to our Patreon.
That's right. For just $5 a month, you can get access to new bonus episodes and our entire back catalog. You can find our Patreon link in the episode description in your podcast player or by going to mvcpod.com. Also, make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast on your podcast player so you don't miss new episodes.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with our conversation about Princess Mononoke with Kate Eastman. Sometimes the problems of the world feel overwhelming, like there's nothing we can do. That's why we want to tell you about Ember Cooperative, a group dedicated to breaking down the challenges we face into meaningful actions we can do in our daily lives. They highlight ways that we can all think and do differently to shift norms and forge a more humane future.
For example, the Ember Co-op team recently analyzed the racist and politically motivated war on drugs, which has ruined countless lives and devastated entire communities. Their action guide includes ideas such as hosting a living room conversation about the intersection of addiction and incarceration, supporting reality-based drug education at your kid's school or in conversations with young people, or if you are the 1 in 4 U.S. workers licensed or certified for your work, advocating for fair chance licensing. You can read the full guide at ember.coop.
For their next project, Ember is addressing the need for more diverse forms of activism beyond just signing petitions and donating money. You can follow their work at ember.coop, or if you'd like to get involved, you can apply to join their team. Add your skills to this small think and do tank where you'll have equal say in what they do and how they do it.
Learn more at ember.coop. That's ember.coop. All right, so today on the pod, we are joined by Kate Eastman. Kate is an actor. She's appeared in the Gone Too Soon Netflix series Archive 81 and in the recent film Maestro. Other TV credits include Leverage Redemption and several entries in the Dick Wolf cinematic universe. You can catch her in the upcoming Apple Plus show Dark Matter and in an upcoming episode of the anthology series American Horror Stories. Kate also writes mostly about nuns, queerness, and life after societal collapse. She is a loving father to 2 cats and probably a Marxist. Welcome, Kate. I'm so happy to have you on. I hear you in our conversations. You've said such amazing stuff. I'm already such a fan of the way you think and the way you talk about things. So I'm really excited to have you on today.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here. I really love the pod.
So, Kate, you're probably a Marxist. Can you tell me a little bit about your, I guess, experience in this Capital Reading Group and how it's been changing maybe your perspective on things?
Yeah, I only say probably a Marxist because I haven't finished reading Capital yet. And I kind of want to have read the whole book before I'm like, and I heart Karl Marx, but I do heart Karl Marx. I think he's really funny and cranky and like such a bitch. But like he reminds me of Miyazaki in certain ways, actually, in that they're both strongly principled human beings who don't mince words about things that they don't agree with. And I say I'm probably a Marxist, but honestly, I feel personally that like my true radical kind of leftist education is in its infancy. Because I've read some texts, but without the grounding of Capital, it can feel a little bit like you're just floating. And
sure,
I also spent a lot of time reading just like novels, and I love novels. I'm a poet. I love poetry. But in terms of developing an actual like robust, grounded political ideology, a thing that I said in the first session of our Capital Reading Group was that a lot of my sort of political belief is very vibes based. Like when I was asked like what my political belief was, I was like, I feel like I might be an anarcho-communist, but that's like an incredibly that's like an incredibly vibes based assertion. And now I don't think I'm that, and I'm leaning more towards Marxism because of just the tool of dialectical materialism, which is so powerful and is such an incredible skill to have, because we live in a world of so much doublespeak and so much people saying something is going on to distract from the fact that something else is actually going on. And dialectical materialism is like, what is the material reality in front of you? And it start from there always. And I've started doing that more and more. And it's really been revealing to me the shortcomings of the vibes-based thinking that I engaged in, that I think a lot of leftists engage in. A lot of like terminally online leftists, which I would classify myself as one. Like I feel like a lot of people have like meme centric praxis, and it's just not enough. You got to read the books. You got to get into the arguments.
And you have to podcast, really, more than anything.
More crucially, you have to podcast.
You have to podcast. You're not doing praxis if you're not podcasting.
The P in praxis actually stands for podcast. I don't know if you knew it.
What I love about the way you phrase that, I think we're all sliding in a little bit by vibes, and vibes are really strong and important and impactful. But I'm sure if you're listening and you're like, I got vibes, it's not that far a stretch. Then like read a few, you don't want it to be too daunting. I think that's part of the project of this podcast, to look at politics via pop cultures, because that's often a lot of like the vibes you don't even know you're getting. There's a lot of vibes that you're getting that you're not even aware of. So like starting by unpacking those, becoming aware, and then building upon it. We're not like saying go out and read Capital immediately.
No, go out and read Capital immediately. Go do it.
Yes, do it.
Start with it. Do it. Just like figure it the fuck out. Watch the David Harvey YouTube series. Just do it. Like do it. That's how I feel.
And that's the repurposing of just do it.
I'm stupid. Like I'm not, I all I've done is go to acting school for like most of my life. And if I can read Capital, you can read Capital. I promise you.
Yes. Go do it.
Go do it.
The one thing I will say about vibes, though, in the value of vibes, is that it's making me think of the concept of the organic intellectual that Gramsci wrote about how essentially through the process of dialectical materialism, there is an intellectual tendency for those who are naturally critical, naturally curious, that don't necessarily have more of like that theoretical basis, but can still find a way to articulate kind of like their critiques of what they're seeing. So like when, I think about my own personal political development, and like I knew from a very early age that like there are some rich people at the top that I'm pretty sure are fucking everything up for the poorer people at the bottom. And I didn't have the way to articulate that via theory, but it was something that I sort of organically came to. So I think there's room for vibes, at least to get you to the place, like we're saying, where you actually start to engage with a more structured theory.
Totally.
And as we're having this conversation, it's like what we always see, right? The vibes are right, and then the theory goes wrong. And that's where you lose, all those people to the far right. And you're like, your vibes were right. You were feeling this inequity. You're correct on that. Just like the ideas that you got brainwashed into believing, the ideology you got brainwashed into believing is not it.
Yeah. And I mean, that's for me why I just think that this idea that you're not smart enough to take on a text or dive into something that is difficult is a tool of the status quo and a tool of people in power to keep powerful tools out of the hands of the people who need them, i.e. the worker.
100%. And when Marx was writing this text, the working populace who was reading this, although uneducated, there was a big uprising of folks who were self-educating. So there was a lot more of that happening at that time.
Yeah, which I think is happening again now.
Yes.
So hell yeah.
Hell yeah. Well, you also chose a movie which I had never seen before and was so glad finally had the chance to watch. But this is like a radicalizing movie. I don't think there's any other way to read it. Yeah, I imagine if you see this movie as a kid, like you are radicalized for life, because there's no two ways to read this movie.
I disagree. I think there are many ways to read this movie, but continue.
Oh, okay. Well, you know what? And again, this is why we podcast. You chose the Studio Ghibli masterpiece, Princess Mononoke. Written and directed by Hayao Miyazaki, adapted for English by Neil Gaiman, starring in Japanese Yoji Matsuda, Yuriko Ishida, Yuko Tanaka, Karo Kobayashi, and Sumi Shimamoto, and starring in English Billy Crudup, Claire Danes, Minnie Driver, and Billy Bob Thornton. The budget for this film was 2.4 billion yen, roughly 16 million American dollars, and its worldwide gross was nearly 26 billion yen, or about 170 million USD. So a pretty big hit. If you've never seen this movie, the story: after his village is attacked by a demon which imparts a deadly curse onto his right arm, the hot young snack Ashitaka must travel to the forest of spirits to find a cure. But on his way, he finds himself caught in an environmental conflict between the industrial city of Irontown, led by Lady Eboshi, who have been violently extracting resources from the nearby forest, caught between them and the animal gods of the forest and their human ally San, aka Princess Mononoke, who declare war on the humans of Irontown.
Released on July 12th, 1997 in Japan, and then on December 19th, 1997 in the US. Other films that we covered from this year are Titanic, Face Off, and Good Burger, just to give you a context.
Good Burger!
Bill Clinton has just begun his second term. The internet is taking off in a real way. The economy is exploding, even though real wages are stagnating. And this is a few years before the Columbine shooting, the Clinton impeachment, and 9/11. Oof, what a period of time. So, Kate, we like to start by asking all our guests, why did you choose this film to discuss on this podcast?
Well, this is one of my favorite movies. I think it's in my top 3.
Ooh.
I literally am looking at a Japanese poster of San and Moro, her mother, the wolf god. I saw this when I think I was 13 for the first time. And looking back on it, I recognize it as like an early moment of gender euphoria because in San, and also the violence of her and her rage, like seeing a young female character who was so animated by her fury was a really like seminal experience for me. It was like one of the first times where I felt represented on screen. And I think I'm not alone in that. I think San is like a serious mood for a lot of young girls. I think for a lot of queer people. The relationships in this movie in general feel very queer. And then the other part of it that really just took me as a kid was this huge conflict of man versus nature and the violence of it on both sides, the frustrating questions it left me with, and also the deep sense of hope that is in the end of the film all felt really important and transformative to me. And I was raised Catholic as a kid, and there was something about the way was something about the way this movie brought in gods and the idea of God that was so much more resonant with me than the God that I was told to believe in. And I think that was another sort of area of resonance. And then, of course, spoiler alert, the gods die, which is like another brain melting kind of thing as a kid. Yeah, so lots of reasons. And also it's a fantasy epic, and fantasy is probably my favorite genre. So it was ticking all the boxes for baby Kate.
I love that.
Well, I love this. I know, Frank, it was your first time. It was also my first time, and I was blown away. And I was trying to figure out why. I've kind of always steered a little clear, and I realized it's because my dad showed me Grave of Fireflies very, very young.
That one?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So I think I was like, I steer. Yeah, it definitely shaped me, but it definitely fucked me up a little bit.
Is that the one about the afterlife? I think you've told me about this before.
It's very much, it was sort of my beginning consciousness of Hiroshima and like just devastating.
Wow. Oh, okay.
It's devastating. And I think it was I was definitely before 13. Maybe in that era, I was like, this is going to be a dark experience. And so I kind of steered clear after that just because it was so much. But this was not a dark experience for me. This was like such a spiritual experience watching this film. It's so rare that you're surprised by where a storyline goes, even when it's that obviously this is what's going to happen, but every moment feels surprising and new and stunning and leaves you like feeling magical and amazed to be on this planet. and ready to, I was like, it's raining here. And I watched it today. I was like, oh, I could run out in the rain. I could have my Drew Barrymore moment. Like, you know, or like, let me at that park. Like, I'm ready to go back, do some crazy things in that park, commune with nature. And the politics were really interesting looking at it through that lens. But first it was just spiritual and emotional. And so not as scary as I expected. Definitely not fully Grave of Fireflies, which I'm sure is a beautiful rewatch, just was very dark as a child.
Yeah, that's a lot for a baby to watch. I mean, Miyazaki is so anti-war in his films. And I think that a lot of his films are about war or have a backdrop of war. I mean, this movie is about war, and his abhorrence to war is really present in how he renders it. Like he pulls no punches.
His abhorrence to violence of any kind, really, it seems.
Yeah.
I mean, other than the violence of resisting occupation, resisting oppression.
Yeah.
Which he also treats in this movie. You know, he's critical of that too, in that like how these cycles of violence beget more cycles of violence. But I agree with Rivka, like while so much of that is at the forefront of the plot of this movie, like it's the movie's about like basically the fight between the industrialists of Irontown and, you know, the spirits of the forest and the animals and gods of the forest. And while that conflict is foregrounded, you're right, at the same time he finds this way to remain so uplifting, so genuine, so sincere, and there's such a reverence for nature that just shone through, especially in Ashitaka's character and San's. But you're right, like San has a little bit more of that anger. But I just loved how every time Ashitaka like encountered a god or some other spirit, he was just like, "Spirit, whatever you want, we got you. Please, we're so sorry. We love you. Please go in peace. It's okay that you're pissed. It's okay. I understand." But it like there was like a
We
real
love Ashitaka, a humble king.
and Billy Crudup is like really wonder. I did watch.
He gave a great vocal performance in this. He really captures Ashitaka's incredible like softness, his gentleness of spirit.
Very, very, very much. And yeah, I had remembered I'd asked Kate via Instagram. I was like, I'm about to fire this up. Am I doing the original? Am I doing the dubbed? And you gave like such a studious answer. I was like, well, the Japanese version has a much more nuance and it's the original language. So like the translation is obviously much more clear to like what the author intended. But of course, the English language version has these amazing voice performances.
And it's more accessible.
And really it came down to, I was just so exhausted. I laid down and put on the Japanese version and I was like, I can't read right now. So like that was it.
Yeah.
I'm glad. Yeah. I'm sorry that I didn't give you a strong answer, but I truly think it's like you're going to
Well, it was a strong answer.
Sounds like you gave a very strong answer.
You gave a very strong answer.
But I didn't give you the gift of making the decision for you. Which sometimes like when I'm asking a question like that, I'm like, please just decide for baby because I don't want to decide. But yeah, so it's interesting. Like my friend speaks Japanese and she and I were talking about this movie. Her mother is Japanese. So she's like a speaker from babyhood. And we were talking about Mononoke. And even in the subtitles of the Japanese, they don't fully capture what's going on with the language in that version because the movie is written in like a high style, old school Japanese.
Oh, okay.
That like the easiest equivalency, though it's like not a perfect equivalency, is to think of like how when you listen to Shakespeare, it's like it's stylized and poetic.
Wow.
So the Japanese that it is rendered in is very specific, but difficult to translate. And so the dub sort of, that's, I was watching this with my roommate last night and she, afterward, she was just like, I have to go to bed now. I understand that you also must go to bed. I will miss you, but we must sleep. And then I was like, I understand. And she was like, I love you, but I have to go to my room and sleep in my bed. I understand. Like everyone is very like, this is the thing that is happening now. I understand. Yeah. It's very sort of, it's a little stilted sometimes. And I think like the most successful vocal performances in the movie, like for me, Minnie Driver is the queen. They really live into the strangeness of the language and sort of like the stiffness of the language.
I thought Billy Bob Thornton does that pretty well too, because it's such a juxtaposition, exactly like you're saying, that I was almost like, what is strange? Is this his choice? Is this the writing? What's happening? But I loved it.
Before I realized it was Billy Bob, I was like, who is this piece of shit talking? This is some famous piece of shit talking right now. Not that Billy Bob is a piece of shit, but he has that that rough around the edges.
And the character
reputation.
it's really what
he's got that piece of shit quality,
he can play a piece of shit absolutely perfectly.
Yeah.
His approach is like totally different, which is just to like naturalize everything as much as possible and like pull it toward him. Whereas I feel like Minnie is incredible because she like rises to it. Billy like pulls it toward him, which is also really suitable for their characters.
And I think it's so interesting with Billy Crudup playing that role, because I feel like I associate him with very overly intellectual, overly stimulated. And this was, like you were saying, Frank, just like so like say it as I see it, like the most earnest, just I am here. What gods, wild. And then I just got to get this out of the way because I did get distracted on my wormhole when I was like, wait a minute, Billy Crudup, Claire Danes, 1997, will later go on to have this tumultuous affair.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Also, how old is she in 1997? How old is he? I know it's a cartoon, but my brain I took a moment.
Yeah, they probably weren't in the studio together.
No.
Generally with these like you just go in and record all of your dialogue.
And yet there was so much charisma in the relationship.
Yeah.
We're going to jump around because I do want to, since
Great.
we're talking about character, I want to talk about San. You're like waiting, you're like, Princess Mononoke, where is she? This is the movie named for, and doesn't come till about probably like 30, 40 minutes in when you meet them, and she turns around and she is sucking the blood out of Moro Mama Wolf.
Oh.
And it's like
so hardcore.
Oh, it's so good. I was like, oh my God, I want to be that. That is everything. And then turns and you're just like, yes. And the prince looks at her and just, that's it. That's what every man that's what every human wants.
He's a fucking goner.
She's sucking that blood out and spit like, oh, and it's just
he says all of that stuff to her and then she's like, go away. Iconic.
One of the best character introductions I've ever seen in any movie.
Yeah, truly. And then later in their trajectory, when what are they doing? And he's like, he's just another epic moment. And he's just like, you're beautiful.
Oh, so she went to kill Lady Eboshi. They were in the middle of that fight, and his wound, his cursed wound, activated, gave him his crazy strength. And he basically single-handedly ended the fight, stunned both of them, carries San at great peril out of the settlement, opens the gate that takes 10 men to open with one hand.
So hot.
And also gets shot. He gets shot in the chest on his way out. And so that moment happens when they're like in the foothills, and he's finally like the adrenaline and everything from his wound is dying down. And so he finally passes out and falls off of Yakul, the yak. And one of my favorite details is when one of her wolf brothers just immediately jumps on him and bites his head and starts shaking it around. and she's like, stop it. And they have that moment where she's like, I should kill you for preventing me from killing her. And she stops her knife just short of his neck and is looking down at him, and he's looking up at her, and the point of the blade is on his neck, and he opens his eyes and just says, you're beautiful.
Oh, I screamed.
And she wigs. She absolutely wigs.
So good.
Yeah, I think that also was really informative for my sexuality, that moment. I was like, what's happening? This is great.
It's also, the romance between them is there, but it's like, it's so complicated and layered. And I love the dynamic that the movie set up between Ashitaka and San, because in a simpler version of the story, San would be like the pure ally of the forest who is not angry and not vengeful and has a more open heart. But then you have Ashitaka coming in from basically like an exiled clan in Japan. So he's coming from like a more remote area or a clan that was.
I have a lot to say about that.
Okay.
About the history that Miyazaki is drawing from that is real versus what's an invention.
Oh, cool.
And the narrative purposes of those things. But continue your thought. I just want to put a pin in that because there's a lot to be said.
That's perfect. Because then Ashitaka he's like the more pure of heart one, and he's given this mandate to go through the world with eyes unclouded by hate.
Yeah, to see with eyes unclouded by hate.
To see with eyes unclouded by hate. So he ends up really being the catalyst for good and for change and for understanding and for communication, which is like I really appreciated that it wasn't just as simple as like the forest people are all good and the Irontown people are all bad and like it's good versus evil. And it was a really nuanced dynamic that was set up, which I really loved.
Well, Miyazaki, there's sort of like a view in the West that indigenous cultures, that Eastern cultures have this peaceful, harmonious relationship with their surroundings. And I also think that this was a thread of thinking maybe this was just an outside conception of Japan where everyone's like, they live so peacefully with their surroundings and diddity. And he was saying that the reality is that humans' relationship to nature has always been violent, and nature's relationship to humans has also always been violent in turn. And Ashitaka is this mediating force between these two forces of equal violence against each other, and their animating belief that they cannot coexist. And Ashitaka is the sort of voice saying, we must coexist. There's no other choice, because the only other option is annihilation, either annihilation of human beings or annihilation of nature, and neither of these things are sustainable.
That's so interesting. And I wonder how much, I want to get right back to the history stuff because I want to hear all about that. But I also wonder how much I'm just thinking about, we started with that love thread, how much the role of love played into that. I do wonder how much that would have been Ashitaka's mission had there not been like this beautiful human, human, and the spiritual realities of love and our connection to that. And its role not only in evolution, but its role in like keeping the whole thing moving, and how often, particularly under capitalism, we are forced to be in denial of those natural instincts and those beautiful, that beautiful intuition. And he is so connected to that, to the point where he has a blade at his chest and he's like, you're beautiful.
You're beautiful.
I love.
Yeah.
It's also a reminder that we get so much further in what we're trying to accomplish when we approach things from a place of like love and construction rather than a place of just like pure criticism or anger, and it's something I have to remind myself about. Like I can go online and talk about how like the United States is, the Fire Nation, like the worst country that has ever existed. We've done so much evil in the world, but that's not gonna like build a coalition. Maybe it'll build a coalition of angry leftists, but it's not going to. It doesn't provide a positive vision for the future, and it doesn't bring people in.
Yeah,
and you also can't go because yes, he loves Zan, but he also forms bonds and relationships with people in Irontown, and many of his actions are decided by his ties to those people as well. Like he's going to leave when Moro is like, you can't stay here, and if I see you again, I'm going to kill you. And so he's going to leave. And then he sees that the women and the lepers are defending Irontown while Eboshi is off with Lord Asano's army to get the head of the Great Forest Spirit. And he sees that they are in duress, and so he diverts and he goes to them and is like, what can I do? Blah, blah, blah. And then Toki extracts a promise from him to bring Lady Eboshi back to Irontown alive.
Right.
And he keeps that promise, even when San is like, we should kill her. And he's like, I can't. Like, I promised I would return her to Irontown alive. Like, people are counting on her there. It's not just his romantic love. It's also his platonic love and his relationships in general. And he's a relational being.
Yes.
And he has just this incredible well of compassion for everyone.
Yes.
Even the seeming villains. Even, is it Jigo, the Billy Bob character?
Jigo. Yeah, Jigo.
Even Jigo, the Billy Bob character, who I think is probably the worst person in the movie, maybe.
Yeah.
Even has like the compassion and like patience to deal with him.
Yeah. And he doesn't want to take any life.
Yeah, and what I love is that it sets it up that we meet his community early on, and you're like, this is something that this community that's been protected, that no one seems to know about, it's his inheritance. He's brought this forward. So we don't get a lot of time with him in his own community, but you get the sense that would not be a strange way of relating or being, that is been preserved. And so when he goes out, it feels very natural. He's not questioning it or like, I'm so special to like care in this way. It's just his way of being, and again, related to something that's been protected and built.
Yes.
And he's been given this death sentence by this curse, and he knows that the curse is hate, and the only way through, if there is going to be a way through, it's going to be through like exploration, curiosity, and like ultimately finding the love there.
Yeah. So the Amishi people that Ashitaka comes from are an indigenous Japanese population. So at the time that Miyazaki was creating Mononoke, there was a huge debate in Japan around Japanese national identity. And there was big challenges coming up, being voiced to oppose the idea that the Japanese people are ethnically homogenous. And so Miyazaki took this group, the Amishi, who were, again, an indigenous population on the main island of Japan in the northern forests. And they were colonized, essentially, and assimilated over the course of a number of years. And this was an assimilation process that ended in 811. And so the movie, they talk about how no one has seen or heard of his people for 500 years, which places the start of the movie in like the early mid 1300s, which is during the Muromachi period. And so the Amishi, it is probable that pockets of their community survived in isolation for at least a couple of 100 years. It's unlikely that there were still Amishi in Japan at the time that the movie takes place, but Miyazaki is preserving them to illustrate this exact thing that you're talking about, that these are people who have continued to survive by staying contained, by maintaining a consistent way of life, by not spreading, by not conquering, by not colonizing. They have the survival of their community is paramount. And also, they're not disturbing their surroundings too much and drawing attention to themselves is a key element of that survival. So he is primed to advocate for a harmonious relationship with nature because it's the thing that has protected his people and kept them alive for, 500 years after their supposed eradication. But with his curse, that first scene is so moving to me because they have that pan of all of the old Amishi men when the wise woman tells him that he's as good as dead to them. And they have that pan of the Amishi men where one of them says, "Oh, our community is going to die out. Like, you are dying, Ashitaka, and with you, the Amishi will die." And there's he expresses such melancholy, but also such acceptance. And Ashitaka has that same acceptance too, where he's like, I'm going to die. So what is this thing that I can do with the time that I have before I die?
That's so interesting. It makes me think of the first scene, as you were describing it, the first scene in Killers of the Flower Moon, if you've seen that film.
I haven't seen that one yet.
But there's, do you know this shot I'm talking about, Frank, in the very beginning when they're sitting with the elders around the fire? And
yeah. It's
a very similar, like, they're going to kill us off, this time with disease and, and colonialism and all of it. But yeah, I'm sure that was an influence. I also remembered right after they do that pan, the prince cuts his bun off. The first time I was like, who do we have here? I loved that.
He cuts his symbol of Amishi manhood off to visually establish his designation as an outsider.
Interesting. It was it was very hot. And I did find his journey he became more femme to me as he moved through the film, which was awesome.
He's also wearing that very ostentatious rooster poncho outfit.
Yeah.
Which is hides his identity.
Straw coat.
Yeah, his straw coat, but it's you're right. It is like it's a little femme. It's definitely not like a mask look. He's not in any kind of samurai gear or anything like that.
My favorite Ashitaka look is when he takes off his tunic when he's going to work the bellows, and he's just in this little he's just in sleeves with a little strap across, and it's like
what ballerinas wear.
Yeah, it's like what ballerinas or queers at the club. It's very we're going to BDSM night and I'm going to work the bellows. It makes me live.
Unless there's anything else on Ashitaka specifically, I did want to kind of turn to Irontown and Lady Eboshi.
Yes.
Because this is these are very dynamic characters, and I think in clumsier hands, Lady Eboshi would have just been the evil rank capitalist who is exploiting everyone and is evil and is, destroying nature and everything. But Miyazaki goes through great lengths to really humanize this person and, show, one, that she is employing or she's bringing into her community some of the most vulnerable sections of society, namely lepers and sex workers at the time. And we don't get the sense, unless I missed it, we don't get the sense that, she is, and this movie and the time of this movie obviously predates what we know to be as capitalism, but it doesn't seem like she is keeping the wealth for herself. It does seem like whatever wealth Irontown, other than maybe having some classier fits than everyone else, it seems like the folks of Irontown are at least sharing the wealth, or they do love Lady Eboshi.
Yeah, they're devoted to her.
So she has created this caring community, and when we see her interact with everyone, she's clearly I'm sorry this happened. This is my responsibility. I'm going to send some, you guys have been working hard. I'm going to send some wine down for you. My ladies, you got this town. I'm not absolving Lady Eboshi from, this clearly hierarchical system that she's created. She's at the top. Mm-hmm. But then there's all the, destruction of nature stuff, which seems very much just to be look, I don't give a shit about any of these fucking pig or wolf gods. I got people to feed. I got mouths to feed. So that's kind of where the true, that's where the more evil shades come in. But I loved how complicated she was.
Specifically, when the forest has been cleared and the wolves wiped out, this desolate place will be the richest land in the world, and Princess Mononoke will become human. Yeah, her intentions are not great.
They're not great.
Also, one of my favorite lines is when she's like, I'm going to show you how to kill a god of life and death. And it's just what? Mommy, sorry. Eboshi's really interesting. I would say she is a proto-capitalist because she's not creating a circular system. Her desire is expansion. Everyone, all of her devotees are Lady Eboshi is going to rule the world. She's a creature of ambition and hubris. And she's a devourer. I would say the way that she embodies capitalistic energy is she wants to expand, and there's no end for her. There's no limit to what she will destroy. But it's complicated, yes. But so during the Muromachi period in Japan, women were powerless, and they actually saw their rights degraded over the course of that period.
Oh, damn. Okay.
Which ended in the 1500s. And Eboshi is this fiction of a powerful woman who's basically an aspiring bourgeoisie. Mm-hmm. And she has carved out via industry, she has secured power and rights for herself in a way that did not exist at the time. And in this way, she's just as countercultural in certain senses as San and as Ashitaka. But she employs sex workers. She employs these lepers. She employs reserve soldiers and mercenaries. And you can totally make the argument that, yes, she is exploiting them, but they all love her and they willingly work for her and happily work for her. And so there's something to be like, I think sometimes like progressive ideology and leftist ideology can run into trouble when it starts to get paternalistic. Or so like whenever you walk into a situation and you're like, I know better, I know what's better for you than you do. That's an attitude that doesn't actually sustain. That's an attitude that lays incorrect foundations, because that's the attitude of colonizing forces who go into a space and are like, we're actually going to run it this way, and ignore the wisdom of the guardians and caretakers and workers and livers of that space who are already there. And so like, if you were to ask, like, the sex workers are like, the men don't bother us. Like there's a kind of equality, a gender equality that exists in Irontown that is like extra historical, but is real in the world of the movie. And if the world of the movie is placed in Japan as it was at that time, Irontown is the only place where there is gender equality.
So like Irontown culturally is like the most progressive place in Japan at this time, even though what they're doing is just like violent resource extraction.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I thought it was really complex. The one thing I would say is the scene where I did feel like, I think they are in fact being exploited, is when they made a point to say, you know, these shifts are 4 days long and we in fact are doing very hard labor. And I thought there was almost like an awareness of the filmmaking that like there's something going on here, that there's a progression here, almost like when we're reading Capital and we look at the systems of reform or the systems inside the factory and you're like, it's a step forward, but it's, you know, this definitely beats the brothel system and we're getting something from Lady Eboshi, but this ain't it, you know? This is got its limits, and its limits are that like we are in fact being exploited. I think same with the lepers. And I liked that we get to see those flaws, because to me watching it, I felt like, oh, Lady Eboshi is not great, even though she's offering this. And it made me as a viewer long for a new system. There was just a longing in this film the whole time of like an abolishment. Yeah. Which nature provides, which nature will provide ultimately.
I also think that the way in which she is a proto-capitalist, a capitalist, is she offers to the worker an illusory freedom. That is exactly what you said. It's a step up from their previous conditions. But I think about like, you know, if Irontown were to go unchecked, how long could these workers sustain this lifestyle before it totally degraded their bodies, their minds? Like, how long would this sort of equilibrium that they've achieved actually last, when the reality of the ceaseless work required to expand forever actually set in physically?
Totally. And the power dynamics, I think, get complex, and it's really interesting to look at the patriarchy in here versus like the feminist arc. But Lady Eboshi is clearly, in some ways, I think, does herself define power as imperialistic power, but also how can she place herself against the men, you know, the imperialist men. And so therefore we see how much of a failure that becomes. You know, I couldn't help but think about like neoliberal identity politics, where you're like, that also does not work. But I felt the film was aware of that.
Absolutely. Like, she only takes the contract to kill the forest spirit because it will protect Irontown and secure her position with the emperor. Like, for her, it's a totally political move, and she doesn't consider the material repercussions of destroying the guardian of the wilderness.
Well, then you also have the other added layer, which I thought was so brilliant, of this attack coming down from the mountains from Lord Asano, who is like the bigger imperialist. He's the bigger proto-capitalist, let's say. So it's this added pressure of, Lady Eboshi basically being like, look, I got to compete in this market and I got these samurai coming down on my neck. So like, I'll cut whatever deal I can to just make sure that like my shit is safe and that like we'll be good. Cause like it didn't need another, cause like we don't see Lord Asano. We get nothing of his character other than like his troops are coming. And I think it did that thing of like adding, let's call it like imperialist market pressure on the way that Lady Eboshi conducts herself through the rest of the film.
For sure.
And I just want to make it clear, I wasn't like, Lady Eboshi is good. She's great. She's perfect. She made no mistakes. She's a wonderful lady. I just appreciated that it was a little bit more, that her character is more like dynamically drawn, and that she, spoilers, obviously this is a spoiler episode, but at the movie is able to change. She's able to reform. She's able to, through her material experience through the course of this film is like, oh shit, I really pushed it too far and I lost an arm because of it. And now we're going to start over from scratch and we're going to find the actual sustainable way to coexist, like this town and nature.
Yeah. And I wonder, I was skeptical on this watch. I was like, I wonder if she'll keep that promise.
Sure.
Or if like her wound will heal and she'll be back to her old ambitious ways. But the other thing I was going to say is like, yeah, this movie really makes a case for the way to bring capitalists to heal is to dismember them.
Yeah.
You just gotta lose an important enough body part, and then maybe you'll chill the fuck out.
Yeah. That's right. The guillotine is the answer to all of our problems.
Yeah, but like maybe it's like a foot guillotine or like a arm guillotine.
A guillotine is a multi-purpose, multi-track tool, okay? Like you can put anything in that guillotine hole, all right? Just wait. Gotta open our minds to what the guillotine can accomplish.
Well, what I love about that metaphor is when it does start to feel really hopeless and things, the more you learn about the system, like the more cyclopean it can feel and large and like cyclopean and oh gosh, do I actually need magic to like take this beast down? And of course, even in this story, there's still like, you're like the hero and the individuals but I like thinking about just start slashing wherever you can. And that's the community building. Like that's the community slashing as many places as you can. Eventually it'll hopefully bring that beast down.
It's interesting. Like Ashitaka is the hero. Yes. And San is a hero. Yes. But neither of them are individualistic. Ashitaka rarely acts in his own self-interest. He almost never acts in his own self-interest. And San has that great line where she's just like, I'm not afraid to die. Like my life is this tiny thing and this wilderness is more important to me than my life. And that's as not individualistic as you can get, basically.
She doesn't even consider herself to be human. She considers herself to be a wolf.
I didn't buy it. I mean, let's go in on San for a moment. There were like a few things.
Okay.
San has a mirror. She can see.
Listen, she was abandoned by her parents as a baby.
Yeah, she had some serious trauma, okay? Which actually I appreciate about the theme in this film as well, is like the literal wounds of trauma felt like they're what became these demons. There was a great line actually from Master Jigo who says, "These days there are angry ghosts all around us, dead from wars, sickness, starvation, and nobody cares. So you say you're under a curse? Well, so what? So is the whole damn world." And that to me felt so core to this of you see everyone's scars on them. For Ashitaka, it's the literal wormy, ghouly strike of the darkness of the demon monster, but everyone has them. And
it's a corrupted god.
Yeah, and for me it was actually what I got from this was like nature is inclusive of all of these things, and it's humans who want to say these dark forces, and humans name it demonic, even the animals, but that nature itself incorporated that. I thought one of the most beautiful images was the forest spirit. Oh, so stunning and amazing, and I'm so grateful for the animation on this, that as the forest spirit walks, plants and flowers become alive and grow, and then immediately as the foot moves, they die. So just this constant cycle in movement is so gorgeous. And that's everything. I was like, that's just every breath is like life and death. you know, that's our constant cycle. And so that these characters all carry around these spiritual wounds and these, so back to San's spiritual wound. Like, she definitely has her issues, you know, like you said, mom and dad were there defiling the forest and then just like gave her up. Could you imagine, like, your parents are there trying to steal from the forest and then give you up to a wolf? That's gonna mess you up, you know? So like, and I really related, I think, to her journey of constantly saying, well, I'm half human, half animal. And she seems to really be wrestling with that. And so does the prince. Like, they're both wrestling with, because people keep saying, like, whose side are you on? Are you on nature's side?
Yeah,
are
to
you on
Ashitaka especially.
And I just, having grown up with, that was a huge part of my journey, is feeling bicultural, biracial, is like, feeling the external pressures of society to say you have to pick a side. That's how we divide and conquer and rule, and you have, what side are you on? So maybe that's why that theme really stuck out to me, of like, that was San's journey. I didn't feel that it was fully resolved at the end, which was exciting. I felt a little disappointed that she went back and that they couldn't figure it out, and that the solution was, he's like, I'll just keep doing this back and forth thing. Like, I was dissatisfied by the end, which I thought was okay. I'm curious your thoughts on the end, because that was the place that I was like, I don't know. Like you were saying, Kate, I was like, I don't know if she's gonna keep that promise. I don't know if this long distance relationship between Irontown and the forest is gonna work out. Like,
I was surprised that Ashitaka was like, I'm gonna go help rebuild Irontown. It's like, dog, what are you talking about? Like, she's like, go fucking hang out in the forest. Did you not learn anything? Like,
I wonder if Ashitaka recognizes that Eboshi needs his influence to keep her word. Like, because like Ashitaka is not. So I was reading this, my friend sent me this essay, which is it's called a third world critique of deep ecology. And deep ecology is this environmentalist belief that the wilderness must be preserved untouched. And it's an environmental movement that is biocentric, aka it places nature at the center instead of humanity, instead of being anthropocentric. And it's a very American ecology movement. And there's echoes of like, so this movie was made in the 90s when activists were crawling up into old redwood trees and setting up camps to prevent them from being cut down. And just this idea of prevent the alteration of the wilderness, keep the wilderness untouched at all costs. And this is in many ways a very beautiful idea. And it was an idea that, like, until maybe 2 weeks ago, I was very like, yeah, humans have had a good run. We should probably all die and just let nature take the planet over again. But like, that's a nihilistic standpoint, and it's not really attractive to the majority of human beings. And so ultimately, it's not really going to get you anywhere. And what Ashitaka sort of symbolizes is this very practical reality that, like, we are both here. We have to figure out how to coexist. So like, rampant extraction and capitalistic relation to nature is not the tea. But by the same token, just letting nature totally destroy everything or like it just sort of like quietly dying out so that nature can reassert itself is also not the tea. And I mean, and there are plenty of arguments to be made. Like, I still find the argument of maybe we should just like die out kind of attractive because I'm depressive.
But what's so interesting about what you're saying in this film is that that ideology just suggests that we are not nature ourselves.
Yes.
Which is that struggle of like, wait, where do I belong? Am I human? You're both, babe. Like, you're both.
Yes.
And I think, no, we are of this thing. We have to, like you're saying, find a way to include ourselves in that picture, not just like let us die off and then the problem will be solved.
Yes. But and also the critique of deep ecology is that, like, to have the standpoint of we should preserve nature untouched, and like basically the people espousing that standpoint are highly privileged Westerners,
right?
Who have their relationship to nature is that it is something that they go and visit, and so actually they have a sneakily industrial economic relationship to even untouched wilderness, Whereas if you apply the principles of deep ecology to the third world, where there are robust communities of people who have figured out agricultural balance with their natural surroundings and have a bunch of like ecological knowledge for how to extract from nature what they need to survive, but not beyond that. If you were to establish say a national park system internationally, you would effectively haul the means of subsistence out of the hands of the workers and the poor and into the hands of the ruling class and the wealthy. So it like the deep ecology to its natural endpoint would absolutely devastate the truly marginalized populations of the world. And I think that that's sort of like, in some ways, like San is like the confused deep ecologist. She's like, I'm not a human, I'm a wolf. And it's like, babe, you are a human. And you can't live in the top of a tree forever. And though I do agree with her, I do think that the gods are actually dead at the end of the movie. Ashitaka is like, they're all around us. And maybe just because I'm depressive, I'm like, nah, they're not, they're dead. and now there's a huge force of spiritual protection is now removed. And what consequences will that have for this wilderness?
I kind of took it as the gods may be dead for now, but there's maybe they will be reborn in the future because the ending came. So at the end of the movie, Lady Eboshi and Jigo successfully cut off the head of the great forest spirit, who then just absolutely loses its shit and turns into fucking starlight black goo that just rises above the forest and then is just choking the entire forest and basically suffocating, suffocating everything. And then once they return the head to it, it explodes. And then I thought, honestly, one of my favorite parts of the animation was that still image of the mountain after the great forest spirit explodes. And for a second, you're like, oh, we're just going to linger on this still of a mountain, and realizing that frame by frame by frame, very, very slowly, we're seeing the plants regrow on it. And it's like, it's a still image, so the camera's not moving. And I was just like, it's like one of those moments where you're like, wait, is there stuff growing? Oh my God, there's stuff growing. Oh my God, look at it all growing. And yeah, but like that kind of signaled to me, like, even after such grave ecological devastation, nature is hopefully going to be always so resilient that it will find the way back, because ultimately we are, like we're saying, we are all nature. Nature is cyclical. Yeah. It's going to find those ways. So maybe the gods are dead for now, but maybe they'll return.
Yeah.
I also thought that whole final third act sequence of the great forest spirit losing its shit, I was blown away that this was written, in the mid 90s, before the climate crisis was really at the forefront of everyone's minds. Because it was such a great metaphor for, we have pushed nature, we have destroyed nature, we have subjugated nature so much, and there's only so much that it can take before it's just going to snap back and fucking kill all of us. And yeah, I was like, I can't believe that was it. I was just like, I can't believe this was the 90s. This feels like something that was like written last year.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting. Rivka, earlier you mentioned the demon and how the demon is rendered. And you talked about how they call it a demon, but it seems to actually be a manifestation of the pain and the hate inside of whatever being. And Miyazaki rendered it that way because he said that that's how like anger and rage feels in him. He said it feels like a viscous blackness that is coming out of his pores and his like orifices. So I think you're so dead on with, they call it a demon to like other it, but it's in them. Like it's in any of us.
It's like, have you ever heard that phrase? I heard someone say this a while back and I've never forgotten. Like, hate is like drinking poison, hoping it's going to kill the other person.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and just how seems obvious, but to see it visually put out like that, how it's the biggest weapon in warfare, right? Is just hate, and it's terrifying. It's terrifying to think about how before hate is deep violence and trauma, and to think about how much hate is being strewn right now through this genocide, through this war. Just like, it's a war fucking tactic. It's terrifying. In this movie, you see it grow, and it doesn't become like an individual matter, even though it's the journey to get it taken away. It sort of becomes just thing that Ashitanka has to, like, it goes away through the process of working with others, and like you said, being other-centered, and he kind of comes to peace with like, oh, they took my bullet wound, but I guess this is going to last. And I'm still kind of working through my feelings and thoughts around it, because it's a very emotional, I don't think it's meant to be an intellectual process. A lot of this film. That's why it's good, because you can't, you're left with a lot more feelings than thoughts.
Well, also there's something, I found this one quote. This is a quote from Miyazaki. Emotions are always at the core of ethical motivations. It's not bad people who are destroying the forest. Interlocking systems in motion without a transcendent moral reference point. Capitalism lacks the parasitic smarts to not actively destroy its food source.
Ooh.
Damn. But yeah, like that last one I think is just a quote from the article where I pulled those quotes from. But yeah, that the Miyazaki of it is emotions are always at the core of ethical motivations. It's not bad people who are destroying the forest. Yeah, so like we need these emotional stories, because until we are transformed emotionally, we lack the fertile ground into which to plant our ethics. And ethics are like, I was talking to that same friend who sent me the article about how basically, like, when you have intelligence without ethics, you get brilliant capitalists, you get Jeff Bezos, you get these obviously incredibly intelligent people who are acting in fundamentally stupid ways, self-interested, stupid ways.
Antisocial.
Yes, antisocial. And I think sometimes I use stupid as like a catch-all word for a lot of different behaviors. But and if we're talking about just like surviving as people, we need each other fundamentally. Like you said, Rivka, Ashitaka and San are part of nature. The human beings are part of nature. And so without ethics, without a transcendent moral reference point, you just get capitalism. You get wealth hoarding. You get everyone out for himself. And left unchecked, you get no more arable, farmable land by 2050.
And then you also get all of the violence and the hate that is begotten from all of the violence to begin with. I thought like the line that resonated with me the most was when Ashitaka is talking to Lady Eboshi about Nago, the boar god demon, who he kills at the beginning, and he says, "I was thinking of the boar god and how he must have died, filled with so much hate."
Yes.
And they place it, like, Miyazaki's brilliant to place it and manifest it in the way in these iron muskets that have been lodged into these creatures' bodies, where it's like, like, how else am I supposed to feel? There's this thing inside of me that someone shot inside of me that's killing me, that is burning my insides. Like, what else would I be left with other than hate? It's beautiful.
There was another, while we're pointing out lines, there was another line, I don't remember who says it or when, but I was like, class consciousness in this film. And it was a throwaway, but they're like, it's never the guards that die.
Oh, it's one of the guys. It's one of the workers in Irontown.
Yeah.
Or it's it might be one of the sex workers.
Yeah, it's never the guards that die.
And like when the captain of the guard is like, "Don't worry, I'll be with her, keeping her safe." And then she's like, "That's what we're worried about."
Yeah. Oh, there's so much to go back and revisit.
I mean, it's truly like a rich text, this movie.
Yeah. We didn't even talk about the scene where all of the Bella ladies were like, "Ashitaka, where are you tonight? Like, why are you hanging out with those boys? Get over here. My God."
I mean, Ashitaka.
And then he's like, "You know what, ladies? I would like to see where you work." It's like, boy, get your head on straight.
But you asked me about the ending. And I actually find the ending really satisfying, the ending feels very queer to me, where it's like two people who clearly are so meaningful to each other. And she is like, "I'm too full of rage. I'm too angry at what Eboshi did to go with you. I have to stay here. I have to stay with my family. I have to stay with the land that raised me." And Ashitaka's response is like, "Yeah, I see you, babe. That's great. I'll come visit." And I actually believe that that's going to happen because I think Ashitaka, I just think he's that guy, you know? I think he found his his queer wolf girlfriend. And he's like, you're it, babe. And I'm not going to change you. I'm not going to ask you to be a different person because the person I love is you. And I will come visit you every weekend.
Yeah, I love that. I love giving the space for rage. Be as you are. Yeah. I was surprised my Western conditioning was like, they're going to bring back the sister because they did the sister necklace at the top. Like, we're certainly going to see the sister again. And I was like, oh, nope.
Okay. In the Japanese, it's not his sister. It's his betrothed.
Oh.
Whoa.
Damn.
Whoa. Okay. Damn. I have a lot of feelings.
Man. How Ashitaka was able to walk out of his village and being like, you know what, it's all good. Like, I'm just gonna go eyes unclouded with hate. Like that is transcendent level patience and compassion.
And what, like 2 days? So wait, you're telling me he leaves his betrothed and 2 days later he's like getting baby bird mouth fed by the love of his life in a forest?
By the hottest wolf girl he's ever met.
Whoa, that scene was hot.
Yeah.
That was like a 5-minute scene of her feeding him.
Yeah, she's like, chew it. Chew it.
Chew it. Wow. Yeah. Were there any other big things you wanted to touch on before we go to awards?
Just a cool little story. So Harvey Weinstein and Miramax were the U.S. distributors of this movie.
Okay.
Harvey Weinstein wanted to cut the movie from 135 minutes to 90 minutes.
No.
And Toshio Suzuki, who's the producer, sent him a sword to his office with a note attached that just said, no cuts. And
that is so
did not
cool.
cut the film.
That
Damn.
is epic.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And I found this great article about the film. And before we go to awards, I kind of just want to read it.
Yeah.
It's because it's a lovely sort of closer. And there's a couple words in here that I'm going to define before I read it so that it's not confusing. The word tatarigami is the word for the corrupted god.
Okay.
So the gods that are eaten by the worm creatures, those are tatarigami. And then the word shishigami is the great forest spirit.
Okay.
So a major theme and historical lesson found in the movie is that no history is environmentally friendly. No culture, no nation, no country, and no people have lived together with nature in the way romanticized nativist ideologies would have us believe. The Japanese throughout history, like people elsewhere, have polluted and destroyed nature as much as any other group of people. This incorporates a dimension of Miyazaki's own environmental historiography, that humanity has always been cruel and brutal to nature, and nature has been cruel and brutal back. The mark of the tatarigami, the spirit of hatred and grief, vengeance and fury, might never truly fade away. Its shadow will haunt humanity till the end of times. But, like Ashitaka, who leaves everything behind to find answers and gives everything up to help strangers in need, just because things might look hopeless does not mean we should just let things be and accept the status quo. Fear and fury might be two of the most primal emotions humans embody, but Ashitaka shows us throughout the movie that these emotions do not define us, as he does not let his cursed mark define his actions. Despite the cruelty and brutality of our own nature and the nature around us, despite the indifference of nature's spirit, the Shishigami makes flowers bloom.
Oof.
Yeah. I feel like that sums it all up. And
Gorgeous.
Kate, really also really great voice work, speech work on that. Yep.
Thank you so much.
I heard the standard American coming through, the sustained voice. It was
Thank you.
beautiful prose.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're right. That's a great place to end that convo, but we are going to have to give this movie some awards. And our first award is Best Politics. Goes to the character with the best politics in the movie.
I think it's just Ashitaka. I think we've just had a whole conversation about how like Ashitaka is seemingly one of the best humans who have ever existed and is able to broker peace between the industrialists of Irontown and nature itself. And like I said, is just always I just loved how reverent of nature he was at every step of the way. It's just like, whatever you need, I'm here. I got you. I'll leave if you want. Whatever. I'm here to serve.
Oh my God. Imagine his like Hinge profile.
Oh my God.
The voice note, the voice note. Hi.
The voice.
Oh.
Yeah, also I think Ashitaka is like, the curse is this really lovely externalization of like the potential of hate and fury in him. And he doesn't delude himself about his capacity for violence.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part of how he is able to move through the world the way that he does, is he's aware of the darkness that he carries. And he's aware that he has to fight actively, not to succumb to it.
Yeah. He really doesn't ever get too angry. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, he does unintentionally kill some people, but he's really horrified by that.
He does do that. Pretty brutally. I'm gonna offer up my favorite beings in this whole film. The tree spirits, Kodama.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm gonna offer them up as a whole. I think they had the best politics in the whole movie because truly, we're just here with Mama Tree. Like, I guess they could get the closest, and they're not doing that thing where like they are just one, but they're also like this separate beings and spirits and clearly have opinions and thoughts and feelings. They make a lovely little shaking noise. I guess it's kind of the animals have, well, not in this movie, the animals have a whole realm of politics, but usually in movies animals have pretty just like basically are like the best politics, the Kodama in this. But I think especially because there's so many of them and they were organized, they made me think of like the organizations of like ants, or they have a brilliance and an organization of their own that we weren't let in on, but we were, because you saw them just moving around the place. I love them.
So heartbreaking after the great forest spirit is killed and the tree spirits are just falling out of the sky, just dead. That was shattering.
Yeah. But then we see one at the end.
Yes, exactly.
They're already coming back with their great butts.
Yeah. Their little butts. So cute.
Their little butts.
All right, our next award is worst politics. Goes to the character with the worst politics in the movie. And this
Jigo.
Oh, yeah, Jigo. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But no, there's other people. There's other candidates.
No, I forgot about Jigo. You're right. Because Jigo doesn't have any community, which I think is maybe like the one thing that kind of separates him from Lady Eboshi, is that she is doing this. Yes, everything she's doing is because of expansion. It's because of imperialism. It's because of power and status, whatever. But she is doing it in some way for her community, whereas Jigo is just like, I'm just here to get my bag. Literally, I'm like here to like bag up this fucking sheep elk's head and get it back to the emperor and make me some money.
Yeah.
I have another offering, which is the Shishigami, the great forest spirit.
Oh, okay.
Does absolutely nothing as all of his attendant demigods are slaughtered systematically. Until his own head gets cut off, and then he kills indiscriminately.
Wow. But yes, you're right. But are we reading the Great Forest Spirit as being like a conscious being who is aware of their own like individualism, or are they just like the manifestation of nature in that they are purely reactive? Like, does the Great Forest Spirit have a consciousness? Is he making these decisions, or is he simply allowing nature to unfold in an unencumbered way? Does that make sense? Like,
yeah, I think that's a really good question, and I don't know the answer.
Okay.
You know what? I'm loving that our awards kind of are starting to feel like at the end of Survivor when they have to make their plea to the jury. So I'm going to offer up, like, I think Lady Eboshi obviously has to be up there,
For sure.
Yeah. And I guess one other thing for Jigo is like the monk thing. Like, I'm just a humble monk trying to get by. Like, yeah. Like,
I also love that like Miyazaki animation flair of like, this guy has a big mole on his face, so he's not a very good guy.
Yeah, I'm just a humble monk has the same energy as I'm just a little baby.
Yeah,
I don't have any money.
Yeah. Okay, our last award is Best Supporting / Spin-off. This goes to the supporting character that this movie should actually be about, or that you would want them to have their own spin-off film.
Oh, what a good question.
What was is it Tico? The woman? Toki.
Jada Pinkett Smith, right?
Yeah.
I would watch a whole movie of Toki.
Yeah.
I would just watch the Toki movie. And I thought, like, we didn't mention Jada Pinkett Smith, who voices Toki, but she fucking kills it. She's like, I thought she has, like, the most, other than Billy Bob, like, brought, like, the most, like, made it her own, made it the most, like, human and, like, naturalistic sounding, which I really appreciated. I also just love, like, I just like anyone that's, like, giving everyone shit the whole time.
Yes. I would watch a whole movie about the wise woman in the Amishi village.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just like throwing her bones.
Oh,
Figure
yeah.
things out.
I mean, I would love to go to her. Just tell me.
Yeah.
Just tell me. Who am I going to throw out there? Of course, the Kodama. Maybe like one of them. Fascinating. Just like, you know, like ants, but Kodama. I thought the apes were really interesting.
Yes.
We could go off, and there were so many characters in this movie. We could go off into a whole ape world. The men kind of bored me. I don't know if I need to see like any of the samurai or
They also all had such annoying voices.
Mm-hmm.
They're just always screaming. Why? Like, why are you screaming so much?
And I know this movie is titled Princess Mononoke, but I kind of want like a real princess. Like I felt she was so unresolved and had so like was just I want to see what now.
I want a prequel about her being raised by the wolves.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Mononoke Hime means vengeful spirit princess in Japanese.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Which rips.
Absolutely rips. Well, Kate, this has been such a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for choosing this movie. But before we wrap, the last thing we like to ask our guests is how we as artists and as people strive to practice our values in our lives, whether they be anti-capitalist values or otherwise. So is there anything that you do in your daily life, whether it's an organization you work with or a practice you engage in, where you get the chance to practice your values?
I would say that the biggest way that I am practicing my values is really interrogating my personal ambition, especially in the realm of acting and that industry, which is increasingly an industry that I'm so disenchanted by. And I try not to buy a lot of things. And I have a beautiful apartment that is like small but lovely. Yeah, just whenever I find myself wanting a thing, a material thing, engaging in a process of like, why? Why do you want that? Why do you want that? Because more often than not, I don't actually want it. I just want like a hug or to have sex.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. That's
No, that's a
beautiful.
very good one. I don't think anyone's said that before, and something that I think that not a lot of people challenge their own instincts as to why they want something. And even just like hearing you say it and saying it out loud, I'm like, oh, I fucking need to do that more for sure.
Well, ever since I've heard the notion that individuality is an invention of capital and capitalism, I've been like really chewing on that.
Like Princess Mononoke on that tree bark.
On that beef jerky, and I'm gonna spit it into the mouth of someone I love.
Kate, this was so awesome. Thank you again. And where can our audience find you?
You can find me on Instagram. I have entertaining Instagram stories, I think. My Instagram is @KateBeastman. I'm also going to give you links to the articles that I read so that people who want to read them can read them.
Perfect.
And also, I'm in a writer's group, and we are all writing new plays, texts, and we are organizing a reading series that's going to go up this year. And there will be a website for that goes live at some point.
That's so exciting.
Kate, thanks for your time. This was lovely.
Thank you so much. This was awesome. Thank you for letting me ramble extensively about this movie I love.
Anytime.
Let's all go to the lobby.
Thank you all so much for listening. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. And if you want to support the show and get access to our Patreon episodes, the link is in the episode description in your podcast player or at mvcpod.com.
For next week's movie, we'll be watching the 2024 dystopian thriller Civil War, but that'll only be for our special Patreon subscribers.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.